The day that I lost Maddox, I was getting high in a Walgreens parking lot in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'd fallen asleep, and a worker there had come outside and saw that I was asleep and called the police, and they came, and I got arrested.
When I first met Maddox, he was a vibrant 2-year-old. Maddox, early on, I don't really think he knew his mother was his mother. The father, who, as I stated, had been incarcerated, he was both seriously physically abusive and emotionally abusive to Ashby. And, it went both ways sometimes. And that was something that Maddox did need to be around. I was Maddox's Casa for 14 months. I visited Maddox once a week. I wanted to be thoroughly involved in the process of making sure that Maddox, as his Casa, was getting everything he needed.
The court had requested a lot of me, a lot, and that was fine with me. I needed the accountability, and I needed a direction.
After the first court appearance, I don't think Ashby really knew that she could do what needed to be done to get her son.
It was really hard to know in my heart that this was it. There were times that I didn't think that I deserved Maddox.
Once Ashby was given supervised visitation, I think she wanted more than that. One of the strongest things I noticed was that Maddox kind of helped his mother focus on what she needed to do. There were times where we'd be sitting at the kitchen table and Maddox was call out to his mother, Mommy, and he would kind of take his little hands and put it on her face, and you could see the focus that both of them shared with one another.
It really wasn't easy. The more I stuck to it, and the more people got to see, oh, it's been 2 months and she's still doing it. It's been 4 months. It's been half a year. She's still going at it, and she's still really trying.
I noticed that during that process, the bond grew stronger and stronger, not only between Ashby and Maddox, but also Ashby's mother as well.
I started to love myself for the first time ever, probably, and start to see that nobody can understand my son like I can, and that I'm the perfect fit for him, and that he belonged with me. The day of the final court hearing, I was getting really nervous because it had been going on for an hour and things weren't looking great.
Judge Harrison asked if the Casa, which I was the Casa for Maddox, if I had anything to state. Of course, I'd already given my initial court report, and I wanted to take this opportunity to stand up before the court and state that of all the positives I've seen, that Maddox should be, custody of Maddox should be given to his mother. Not knowing what Judge Harrison was going to do, but that was me as a Casa. I'm there for the child, and I saw what Maddox had been through, and I knew what was best for Maddox at this particular time in his life.
My life with Maddox is what it was meant to be. It's easy. It's right. It just kind of perfect together. He's happy, and everyone can tell. It's been a year since we've been a family again, and I went back to school to become a cosmetologist, and recently graduated, and on the same day got engaged to a wonderful father figure for Maddox. If Darnell wasn't a part of this, Casa wasn't a part of this, then I think we'd still be fighting. I think Maddox would still be in joint homes, and it'd still be really stressful on him.
I tell you what, it makes it all worthwhile when you see a child go through that process, and how the court system and Casa was involved in a very important process. It makes me proud.
Whew. I've seen that video so many times, and I still teared up just now watching it. So, Ashby, I'm curious, when you watch that video, what comes to mind? What do you think and feel when you're watching that?
Emotional every time. David did a really good job. I feel a lot of things when I watch it, from the beginning, talking about the moment he was taken from me, and sorry.
Yeah, no, totally understandable.
I was just in such a bad place, and I just loved him more than anything. But I was not what he needed to be with, and it's really hard to come to terms with. But then it's a nice summary in 6 minutes. And then just to seeing Darnell always makes me really happy. We got a really good relationship, and he bonded with all of us really well, and it makes me proud to see that. And kind of, even, it's been a year since the movie or the video, and then when I was doing the video, I was like, it's been a year since I got him back. And that every year, I mean, we're just living a really good life now, and it just makes me happy. So
do you celebrate at all, like an anniversary or anything, of like when you got him back or anything like that? Or is it more sort of the natural milestones, like birthdays and things like that?
No, I don't get that, because our case was really different, and being placed in different homes back and forth a lot. And he had pretty much been staying back with me a lot of the time when I actually got in court, full custody. They let my mom integrate how much time I got to have him, how many overnights I got with him, and sorry, my voice is shaky. So it was just kind of a gradual thing. The last 2 months before I actually got granted the final custody, he had already been staying with me, and I don't know, I wouldn't want to do that. It doesn't really seem fair to the other side of the family. To be yay. I don't know.
Gotcha. No,
I know what I went through and what we have now, and I'm just grateful for it every day. So
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, and why don't we, I feel like the video kind of gave us a bit of an overview too, but first, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, who you guys as a family are today, and then we'll walk backward and kind of the journey to here.
Okay. So I'm remarried. He has been in Maddox's life since he was a little bit before he was 2. He chose to call him daddy all on his own. He still has phone conversations with his biological dad and stuff. So, but he's a great dad, and he is a supervisor for First Piedmont, a dumpster company, and I stay home with Maddox. And before COVID-19, he was already going to be a homeschooled kid. So, and
You are not regretting that decision at all right now,
no,
are you?
I'm not. I'm not. I'm like, oh. So he starts kindergarten this year, so we've just been doing preschool stuff, and I do hair from home. I have a salon in my home, and I'm also a mentor for Agape Center for Lynchburg. There's one in Manita. So I help people in similar situations or just other different types of crises. So I just I help people, going through crisis. And Maddox, he does karate, and he was gonna do t-ball, but and he loves to draw, and he loves Legos, and he loves his family, and he is a talker. He's extremely extroverted, and I'm not. I'm a lot better, especially having to do hair and all that kind of stuff and be a mentor. You kind of have to talk to people. It's not so easy for me. And he makes me talk to everybody. So he's a very happy, very lively, active kid, and we're just really happy. We go on all the adventures we can. We just have fun.
Nice. Yeah. That is so beautiful to hear about. And one thing I love that you said in the video, you said something about no one knows him like you can. The two of you just fit together. And I think that is such a wonderful and important thing for us to remember as we are talking about, families that come into contact with the court system or the child welfare system, that families are the best experts on their children, and we really need to make sure that we are honoring that expertise and that that sacred place for children, and working to get them back home. And as we dive into the details, it's worth noting, so for Ashby, while Maddox didn't formally enter the foster care system, instead sort of the family network was able to be a placement for Maddox so that he could avoid coming into foster care. But also, Ashby, would you say, for you, it felt very similar in that you still lost Maddox. You were restricted from seeing him at all for a time. You have to work with social services and court process to be able to get him back and get contact back with him. Is that accurate to say?
Oh, it's absolutely accurate. Especially in the beginning, I couldn't even, he was a baby, so he couldn't really talk, but I couldn't even call him for 30 days. I couldn't see him. I couldn't do anything. And he was living with my ex-in-laws, and they fought me a lot through all of this process. Also on much better terms now, but in the beginning, they fought to keep him from me very hard. And then my mom, when she got involved and she got half custody, she didn't give me any slack. Nobody did, and that's exactly how it needed to be, but I mean, I had to fight tooth and nail, I think, the same way I would if he was in foster care. So
Yeah.
it was very similar.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point about having to fight tooth and nail because, yeah, I mean, especially if you're working to change patterns or change life that led to the child or family coming into contact with the child welfare system, there is going to have to be a lot of grit and resilience and persistence involved. And it's also worth pointing out that a lot of times when we think about foster care or the child welfare system, what comes immediately to mind as sort of the solution is, oh, adoption. Everybody should volunteer to, adopt. But the fact is that nationwide, almost about 50% or over 50% of children in the foster care system exit to reunification with their biological parents. But it's also worth noting that Virginia is way behind on those statistics. In Virginia, only about 25% of families reunify, compared to higher than 50% nationwide. Last year was a little better. We reunified 27% of children from the foster care system, but also Virginia, when you add up the percent of children that reunify with their parents and then an additional 17% that are placed with family to exit foster care, that still adds up to less than 50%. So we are way behind in this. And really, Ashby, I mean, you overcame the odds and the statistics in the state to be reunified with your child. So can you tell us a little bit, give us a snapshot, what was going on in life in that moment when you came into contact with the court system, and sort of walk us through the big picture.
So do you want to know all the things that I had to do? Is that what you're...
Well, first, give us a snapshot of how did it happen that Maddox came to be taken out of your care? What was going on in life at that time?
Okay. Like I said, I was in Nashville, and that was my first attempt to leaving my first husband while he was in jail. And I had been clean or sober, dry, or whatever for a couple months. And then he was supposed to be released, and I got really nervous, and I ended up relapsing that night, and that's when they took him. But in that time of my life, I was doing a little bit better. And I think I might have been all right if I stayed there, and I didn't do that day, and, things. But as awful as everything was, it's exactly what needed to happen. Because if I didn't have all that stuff, then I think a lot of bad things could have happened to me and him. I think it's very likely that I probably, if all the things didn't happen, I don't know, if I stayed there, that relapse would have probably happened again, and it might not have gone the way it did. And then so he got taken, and I came back to Virginia, and I stayed with my dad for a little while, and I tried to get back with my husband, ex-husband, and we did. And as I had told you on the phone, those 4 months were worse than like our whole 4 or 5 years of being together. So, I mean, well, not the worst, but they were consistently bad for 4 months. And so that's what was going on when he got taken. And like I said, Casa didn't get involved until about 6 months later, when things got really bad and with my husband, ex-husband. And then Virginia's social services had to come and see him, and they didn't take them from them, but they told me that I had to leave. So or no, I had already left by then, but they told me I couldn't go back. They had to call me because I had escaped my situation, and when they contacted me, I wasn't there anymore, but they told me I couldn't go back to see him, and I'm really glad that they told me I couldn't, because who knows if I would have just gone right back, you know. But I didn't. So.
And Ashby, you mentioned in the video and when you were talking just now that substance abuse was a part of the picture. And when you and I talked on the phone, we talked about this idea that, you know, when we see substance abuse or use in our cases, whether it's the parents, whether it's a youth, then we really need to rewind the tape and look for the initiating trauma. There is trauma there that needs to be unpacked when there is substance use. Can you talk to us a little bit about how did substance use come to be a part of your picture? Was it a response to something? What did that pattern look like for you?
Well, I have, I'm the youngest of 5 children. I started using when I was 12. And I have, well, it's also in my family. Addiction runs in my family. My parents, you know, there's a lot of things that I love my parents now. I mean, my mom was a big issue for me growing up. We had a lot of problems. We weren't close. I had a lot of emotional abuse in my mind, that I wasn't loved, and it really, I just felt like I couldn't compare to my sisters. And I thought I had 4 sisters. I didn't think any of them loved me, and my parents got divorced, and I just felt like nobody cared what I did. Everybody was too busy living their own lives. And I actually, I didn't use a whole lot when I was 12, but that's where it started. I began, and then when I was 13, I actually tried to commit suicide in my mother's care, and she lost custody of me when I was 13, and my dad had it. And actually, even though my dad had custody of me from the time I was 13 to 18, I moved to my grandparents, to my aunts, to my sisters, back to my dad's. I was all over the place. Mm-hmm. Nobody really, I just did what I wanted. And it was just really, it definitely goes, there's trauma. Mm-hmm. I know now that I'm loved. I don't, you know, I was bullied a lot too. I was bullied a whole lot. So, you know, I just, a lot of things. And I just didn't really feel like I had anybody that I could talk to. And when drugs came in, I didn't really need to talk to anybody anymore.
Yeah.
You know, could just be funny and have friends and have fun. I didn't have to be serious or actually liked or loved or anything. Mm-hmm.
So in some ways it helped to compensate for maybe like skills, like interpersonal or relational or attachment skills that weren't getting your needs met at that time. And would you say also that, so the substance using continued as an adult too, and would you say that it was a response to things that you were experiencing in the moment too, like when you were in that household with your ex-husband, that was a very dangerous situation for you and your well-being?
Yes. At a certain point in my marriage, drugs didn't come about being fun anymore. Well, I did heroin. I was an IV heroin addict, and when you're that, I mean, you get a physical attachment and you get sick. So on top of that, and I mean, I did all kinds of drugs, and you know, sometimes here and there, and he would like ration them and things and tell me what I could and couldn't. And most of the time, it was just to deal with being alive, honestly, being married to him and being alive. It was just how to handle life. And it was definitely a response. It was the only response I knew. If I was, even if things were going good, it was the only response I knew. I mean, I was 12. I mean, my brain hadn't even fully developed, and I was, it was the only thing I really knew. So
Yeah. And definitely it sounds like it was a very long established pattern. So especially when under stress, we return to patterns, coping mechanism, things we know. And especially too, I mean, it sounds like just from what you've described, from 13 to 18, like when you got into marriage and under further stress or distress, you maybe didn't have a well-developed support network at that time that you felt that you could reach out to help absorb some of that.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
didn't. And then getting married to him, it just reinforced that I wasn't worth anything and that nobody really cared what happened to me and that I deserved everything that he would do, or that and I just accepted it. I was like, I've been a pretty crappy person. I was like, even when I did want help, which made it hard asking sometimes.
You didn't feel maybe that you were worth the help. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, at first. And then when I would get some help, and I went in my revolving door of rehab and AA and NA and what are they, the houses that you go live in, the halfway houses. I'd done all that, and then I'd relapse, and then I'd be like, well, who's gonna help me now? Like I always wanted to. Every time I went to stop, like I meant it. I wanted to stop. I didn't know, and it wasn't time for me to stop yet.
And you and I talked a little bit about how, and I think it's really important for our volunteers to know, and anybody working with families, that relapse is part of the recovery process. And kind of like you're talking about just now, maybe you got introduced to some skills, some new ways of thinking, that you started to work on those things. But also, it sounds like from hearing you talk, both maybe you needed more time to practice those skills, but also maybe trying to apply those new ways of thinking or behaving. They didn't necessarily, it was on a collision course when you went back to your life and tried to practice some of those new skills or behavior. It didn't really work until the environment fundamentally changed. Would you say that's accurate as well?
Yes, it is. A lot of times in my first marriage, and I told you that I had my dry period where I stopped using for about a year and a half. And that's why I was pregnant with Maddox and after he was born. And but I didn't change anything else about myself. I just kept doing the same things. And it wasn't until I relapsed after Maddox was born, and that I lost him and I left my husband. My dad took my car from me. I was at the Salvation Army. I didn't have a phone, didn't have anything. And it was like a clean slate. And I'd never felt more freedom in my life to just start over and finally do the right thing for myself. And at that time, that was the goal: get better for myself and just hope that Maddox, where he's at and who's taking care of him, are doing their best for him. and then, you know, be better for him one day. And there are plenty of times that I look at my husband now and just told him I didn't think he deserved me, and that he deserved so much better. And even as I was getting better, I was just like, I'm still so broken. But I had a lot to go through, and with therapy, counseling and therapy, and I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah.
rambling.
No, you're good.
Um,
And can I maybe, just to recap, so that everybody's kind of following the arc of the story. So there were periods of time while you were still married to Maddox's father that you had tried to attempt to stop using substances, and you did have periods of sobriety when Maddox was born, and then it sounds like there came a time when you tried to leave your husband. He was in jail, and you left with Maddox to go to a different state. And then you were triggered because Maddox's dad was getting out of jail. Is that right?
yeah,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I was scared of him finding us, and made the wrong choice.
Gotcha. And so then you used, and that was in the parking lot, the Walgreens parking lot, or okay. And then Bedford DSS came and got Maddox, is that right? And placed him.
Well, actually, what happened, because they had called the police, so Tennessee, social services had come and got him, their CPS.
Okay.
They came and got him, and his biological dad and paternal grandparents came and got him from Tennessee.
Gotcha.
And then I followed and went
Okay.
back. I went back and packed all my stuff in a couple days, and then was back in Virginia.
Gotcha. And was it then at that time, so Maddox stayed with his dad and or the paternal grandparents, and then that's when you got notified that you had to leave, that you couldn't go back, is that right?
No, I went back and lived with them for about 4 months, and then the using got really bad between both of us, and somebody had reported again. But it's been a while, so I can't remember why I was the only one and not my ex-husband who was told that they couldn't be in contact with him. I don't remember why it went that way, but it did. But it was very soon afterwards that he got the same.
Gotcha. Okay, so then there was a period of time where Maddox was just living with the paternal grandparents, and then you mentioned that there was a period of time, at least for 30 days, when you were not able to see Maddox at all. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because it's not uncommon in some of our localities. You know, the goal is definitely to try and start visitation between the parent and child right away. But sometimes there can be a little bit of a lag, and I think for us in the system, we think, oh, it's, you know, we'll get there, it'll be fine, you know, we'll wait until there's a parenting coach in place. But can you talk a little bit about what those first 30 days were like, and what was going through your mind when you weren't able to have contact with him?
It was really bad, because, okay, well, I had, my husband and I had got together, and I didn't have anything to do. I didn't have a child to take care of. We didn't have any animals. I didn't really have anything of my own. And still didn't have a phone. I had a place to stay, but I didn't have anything else. So I was twiddling my thumbs a lot. Well, that's a nice way to put it, because my anxiety and depression was really bad. And there were times where I didn't know if I wanted to sit in this chair, or if I wanted to go take a shower, or if I wanted to go do laundry. I couldn't make up my mind. I was just so upset and lost. I just didn't even know what to do. But in the 30 days, they contacted me. And even though I didn't get to see him, they did go ahead and give me, things that I needed to do. So I could get started on those things. So if I wasn't trying to get into my IOP program or counseling, then I was kind of a nervous wreck until my husband came home, and we would play. I mean, we'd play board games, or, I would got back into my old hobbies to pass time. I just had to find new things to do. So it was a process. But it was, like I said, I'm glad it went the way it did. And even though I couldn't see him, I was able to get a start on what I needed to do to be able to see him.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit, what was that to-do list that social services gave you? Did it feel overwhelming at times? Were there barriers that you experienced trying to fulfill that list?
Yeah, it was definitely overwhelming. A lot of things overwhelmed me in that time. But I got through it. Another thing, I had also, since the suicide attempt at first one at 13, and the drug use and things we've known about since I was about 12, I have always been jumping back and forth between medications and psychiatrists and things like that. And nothing ever seemed to really help me. And in this time period, I switched to, I don't take any more prescription drugs anymore. I just take vitamins and CBD oil, and that has helped my anxiety and things so much more now. And so that helped, being able to, when I figured out something that could also just kind of help level out things going on in my head, to go and be able to open up and share at IOP. I had to go to counseling for PTSD. I had to go I had to do drug tests, random and planned. I had the Casa visit. I had the social service visits, the home visits. I had to meet with guardian ad litems. I had to meet with my lawyer. I had to have family meetings at social services. I had to take parenting classes. My IOP, that was 3 months, intensive outpatient, 3 months. It was a lot. And I did, I even signed up for anger management, which I didn't need. I just found out they offered so many things, and I just had a lot of anger and resentment build up towards my ex-husband, my mom, and my in-laws, that through therapy we worked out it's just regular trauma, and I don't have anger issues. I was rightfully angry.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I did everything.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about IOP, that intensive outpatient program, for people who might not be familiar with it? What is it? What is it for? And I will also say, I'm curious to hear your response to this. I have so many parents in cases that hate the idea of IOP, partly because they say, I don't want to be in that group setting and share with the group. It's, I don't want to open myself up like that. What is IOP, and what makes it intensive? What's the intensive part?
The intensive part is, so you have intensive outpatient programs, or you have inpatient programs where you're going to go to like a 28-day program, or a week detox or something, and you stay there. I've done those things, and I would always feel good after, but then a time came that I didn't know how to cope again with the outside world. I didn't have, what I loved about IOP is that It was intensive because it's 3 days a week. They have morning classes or night classes, and they're about 4 hours for those 3 days. And it's 3 months long. And what I really liked about it is, and for me, opening up wasn't a problem at this point. You know, I've been to NA and AA and those programs, and but like I said, with this, I really liked that when real life was happening and it got too much, I could sit there and say, okay, I'm going to go get high. But then it's like, oh no, I'm going to go to IOP in the morning. I can't sit there and tell everybody, you know, it was like another accountability. It's a way to integrate like rehab and real life together. Doesn't work for everybody. A lot of people, the 30-day or 28-day is really beneficial, but I'd done it like 2 or 3 times and it just wasn't. So that worked. I liked it a lot. And the people are really, I like the workers at Horizon that we have, the peer support. I mean, just the staff it was really good for me. I had a really good experience with them and other people in the class. Like I said, I've had problems with the AA and the NA here.
Yes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I didn't really, and it worked again. And they say it when you're in the meetings, you know, it works for, you know, I forget what they say, 99% people, or I don't necessarily agree with that. And like I told you, a lot of what I give praise to, I praise God. I am a Christian. I don't know how much I can say about that, but
Hey, anything you want, girl.
So I give
Your microphone.
the glory to God for me. And in that place, like I like Celebrate Recovery. I like Celebrate Recovery a lot. I think it's a really good program. The NA and AA, I just had really bad experiences with using with people or having people there for the wrong reasons. Or I didn't, and people just didn't connect well, and anonymity was broken a lot, and that's something in IOP that I never experienced. And a lot of those people never even been to AA or NA, but they knew, you know, what was said in the room was a safe place, and I never had to deal with that in there, so that was nice too. But I still I agree with, you know, the principles and the steps and everything. And I practice them. It's just not the community I chose to go with to stay sober and clean. I got a lot of that in Celebrate Recovery. Like I told you, there's a personal thing that happened that I don't really go there anymore. But I do think that it's a really good program. But my support really came from my family and my friends and Agape, the other place that I work at. I have a really good support system. My family is amazing. They have forgiven me, and I've got a big family, and I hurt a lot of people. And I'm gotta say, I'm pretty sure about 100% of them are amended now. And that was what really got me through. God and my family. Those programs are beneficial, but I just want people to know that they're not always the answer. There are other tools and outlets to stay clean and sober, even if it's not what people would say is what you're supposed to do or normal.
And just as a
Everybody needs to give it a shot who is an addict. I think everyone who is and wants to get clean, they need to give these things a shot for sure. They're really helpful. But
And as a footnote, just because I know we have a lot of current CASAs and CASAs in training, and are always up for more community resources, Celebrate Recovery is the model that it's always connected to a church environment? Because I know our Blue Ridge Community Church in Forest has a program, and I want to say that there's a church in Appomattox now that has a Celebrate Recovery program, and I don't know if there are any others, but
Yeah, there's actually a couple in Lynchburg. There's the one at Blue Ridge, and there's one at Heritage Community Church. Liberty actually does it. Sometimes it's not year round though.
Awesome.
So and I think in Bedford too. Yeah.
And that's free, right?
Yeah,
Celebrate
totally
Recovery.
free. It's done a little bit differently. It's a Christ-centered recovery. You know, in NAA, they say your God is your God, whoever you want and stuff. So it's a lot easier to, when you are a Christian or whatever your faith is, and you're with other addicts, to be able to relate spiritually to one another. You know, it's easier. For me, it was really comforting because I found a lot of comfort and strength in my faith. So that is, I think, in anybody's life, whatever you believe in, spirituality is like really important. And to be able to connect with people. But yeah, it's done a little differently. They kind of have like an hour lesson, and then that like touches on addiction, and it's not just drugs, it's all of them. You know, pornography, just sex problems, eating problems, just past traumas, hurts. It's for anything under the sun. And you go and they do a lesson for like an hour, and then they split up into gender specific and issue specific groups for another hour, and then you share if you feel comfortable or not.
And it's a family based, is that right? You can bring family members with you?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, in ours, I think it might differ, you know. Some places are open, some are closed. It just depends on the location.
Gotcha. Awesome. Okay. Well, all right. And so to sort of track where we are in the story, so you were in that 30-day period where you couldn't visit Maddox yet, but you'd been given your list of services by DSS to start working on. What happened after that? When were you next able to see Maddox? And was that conditional on a negative drug screen, anything like that? Like, what were the parameters around visitation?
Yes. I finally got to see him after a month. We had to find an appropriate supervisor for me, which was difficult in the beginning because I had so many broken relationships. And my mom, she couldn't do it because of our past. And so I actually ended up having to get my 80-year-old grandmother to be my supervisor. So I would have my visits at my grandma's house once a week for maybe a month. And then there was a lot of different people who then then I think my sister got approved. And then I was able, see, at first I was only spend a few hours once a week with him at my grandma's house. And then when we got past that, my sister was able to do it, and my mom works, so my sister would watch him during the day. So then I was able to, a couple days a week, go to her house and spend the day with him. And it was conditional. If I failed, you know, there's going to be, but that never happened. So I never got backtracked or anything, but it was conditional. Yeah. And then it just slowly progressed to more and more things, more and more time. Good. So and then my mom was finally able, well, then she got custody of him, and she got 50% custody of him with the other grandparents. So when that happened, then I would go spend some time there too. And then I was able to spend the weekends she had him at her house with her.
Nice. And it's worth pointing out to, just again, to alert people to community resources. So for children, if Maddox had been in foster care, then typically social services will offer the parents 1 hour of visitation per week. And it always pretty much starts out supervised. Usually social services or a professional party, like a parenting coach, will supervise.
At the first time, I think that was my,
Okay.
because I did have
DSS supervised it the first time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Gotcha.
then
Yeah.
grandma did it after that.
Okay, yeah. And a lot of times if the child's in foster care and DSS is still supervising those visits, then usually the parent and child will come to the actual social services building, and there's usually a visitation room. But some of our DSS agencies don't have that. So sometimes they have to, like I think Amherst uses like the play place at McDonald's a lot of times. You sort of have to scrounge up a location. But when a child isn't in foster care, that's a very common problem about either, because of poor relationships within the family or finding a relative who can really be alert of what to watch out for in a visitation to keep the child safe, who will know how to set and enforce boundaries if any concerns come up. That can be a problem. So if there's no one within the family that DSS feels is safe to supervise or that, the parent is okay with, then the only real resource that we have in our community is the YWCA. They offer supervised visitation that's $25 an hour, and which, like I'm sure in your situation, it would have been very difficult if you'd had to pay $25 an hour for visitation. That could be very cost prohibitive for you at that time.
That sounds really awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just something to know about. It's always a great goal for to be able to find someone in the family to supervise.
Yes, it is.
And I will also say, sort of connecting to your story again, that is a huge benefit of the child being able to be placed with relatives, because you end up, the parents get to have a lot more time with the child than if they're placed in a foster home with a stranger that may not want mom or dad or family to know where they live and want to kind of preserve that boundary. So even if a child is in foster care, if they can be placed with a family member, that allows growing contact, which I think you might probably say that really helped support your end goal of getting Maddox back. Like if you had been stuck with 1 hour visitation a week for months and months and months, it would have been really hard to keep growing that relationship.
Yeah, definitely. And like Darnell said in the video, there are times he didn't, at the beginning, that Maddox might not have thought that I was his mom. And then being taken, because I was taken from him, and it wasn't, at first it was really hard because we did have a bond, and then it was gone. And then when I got to see him more, it just hurt really bad because he didn't want me, or he didn't want me to hold him. He wanted my mom to hold him, or he wanted his papa, or he wanted somebody else that wasn't me, or he didn't want to listen to me. Not that,
How old was he at that time?
but when that time he was 2.
Okay.
So like I said, and I'm just so lucky that all this happened, because when it did, because I mean, he doesn't remember any of this stuff. And a lot of he's had to go to play therapy and see people to, see where he has stood through all of witnessing the abuse and everything. He's had to do things, and all of the people have said that they're really impressed with the things that he lived through, that he doesn't have anger issues, or that he's just a really happy kid. And I'm just really glad this all happened when he was so young. And then I got my life together so that he doesn't have to remember me like that.
What do you feel like were some of the impacts on his behavior that were being seen earlier on that prompted that need for some therapy for him specifically to work through some of those
I think in general, they wanted to see how, because the situation was really bad. I mean, it was really bad. I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, I was doing drugs and I was abused. It's another to be in it and see how it was. And to hear really in-depth details that people like Darnell and other people had to hear. What was the question? I'm sorry.
What were the impacts being seen on Maddox's behavior?
Okay, so I think they wanted to see in general, but also with the going back and forth to homes. And in the video, and joint homes aren't bad, when you're older and stuff, but for the age he was, it wasn't going good for him. Mm-hmm. He would have he would have tantrums and he would hit and stuff for like the first 2 days when he came back to my mom's house. He'd be really angry and yelling and hitting. It wouldn't stay that way, but it was concerning. So but I think in general they just wanted to see how he was affected from everything. But besides that, with the couple days when he came back from their home to ours, he handled it really well. I think, and I'm really surprised at the number you said about how they don't go to family members in Virginia. That's really sad. I know a lot of people aren't as lucky as I am to have a huge family and still come running back to help you. But I mean, there's got to be some. I mean, I don't know. I feel like if there's family out there that's willing to take them, and they're approved and everything and are safe, that I can't believe the number's so low.
Yeah. And
not good.
It's a great plug for our next training session. Right. And that's a great plug for our next training session. Make sure you come back and sign up for the next one, because we'll talk a little bit more. I think, it's possible that there are concerns or biases that maybe we in the system, or hesitations have about family members. Something that you and I talked about on the phone, a question that comes up a lot with family members is, well, how could they not know? Like, if we got to this point where the child was in foster care, or there's been court or DSS involvement, then why haven't any family members noticed it before now and stepped in? What would you say to someone who asked that question in your situation? I mean, family was there kind of as a fallback option, but how did the situation get that bad without family stepping in to intervene?
Well, when I was telling you, in my first marriage, I didn't see a lot of people. And I would say that, I mean, it's not some people are really good at hiding things. Like my husband now said he never guessed that, horrible things were happening when we're at home. Because my current husband, he knew, we've known each other for a long time. He knows my ex-husband, and he just thought we were a normal couple. And some people can, just hide it, and then people might not, they just don't want to see it. And some people, like with my mom, like with my family, I pushed so many people away. So when it got to a point that my ex didn't even want me to talk on the phone without him knowing what I was saying, or to be seen without being there, they didn't even know it was as bad, because I had pushed them all away. And that doesn't mean that they don't love my son. I mean, at this point, I was the mom and nobody else had anything to say about it. And if I told you to leave me alone, then they just left me alone.
Yeah.
a lot of times it was really hard for me to be around my family when I was with him or using, and it just made me feel worse. So I just pushed him away, and like I said, some people just don't want to see it. But I don't think that means that they shouldn't be able to be considered for that they don't love the kids in their family and would be willing to step up.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that's a great point, that we really have to think about that bridge building piece to family, that
Yeah.
sometimes there is active work that has to be done in restoring some of those family relationships, or because we know that abuse thrives in isolation, from isolation because you're stressed and you don't have support networks to draw on, but also isolation in that sometimes when abuse is going on, someone who is actively abusing, they want to be far from sight so that no one can stop it from happening, and unfortunately sometimes there are aspects too with family networks of there's been some measure of enabling of some of the behaviors that have occurred. And I think when you and I talked, you said that there was some of that too on some sides of the family.
Yes,
Yeah.
a lot of enabling on my ex-husband's part, his parents. I think that's ultimately what, I mean, it got brought to light that they just they let him do what he wants, but then they could talk to other people, and I'm sorry. It's just, there's enabling, and yes, it's hard. Some enablers can be really manipulative, and that's when you talking about advice to give Casa worker is to be, to not be going judgmental and thinking you know everything after one session.
Great point.
To use your ears a lot and your eyes. Don't say a whole. Just listen to people and see how they are, and find out for yourself. If because people are going to love you, and then so just to be careful and to listen out for the truth of things that are going on.
And would you say too, don't rest your whole understanding of the case based on one person's perspective or one side of the family's perspective? You got to talk to everybody.
You do, absolutely, everybody. And you need to go in with every person, a clean slate. I don't care how they look. I don't care how they sound or whatever. I don't care. In situations like this with families in crisis and kids are involved, and we're trying to figure out how to give them the best life possible after living in such chaos and action and just bad situations. We need people to go in with clear minds, and we need to look at all these adults and who's gonna be the one who's gonna do what it takes and keep them safe and keep them loved and happy, and who's gonna be the real one to do it, and who's just trying to manipulate a situation and things like. You just have to be really aware of people.
And when you and I talked before, this is a good segue into talking about your experience with different players in the system. When you and I talked before, one thing that you mentioned that Darnell, the Casa that served Maddox, one way that he was different is that he showed up. Literally. He would come in person to observe you and Maddox together, to talk to you, to see your home. And that was actually different from, for example, even the guardian ad litem or Maddox's attorney in the case. Is that correct?
Yes. So Darnell is amazing, and I know I've said it, and Casa is just a great program. The people that were involved, I'll say, and I've dealt with different social workers, and I've dealt with different guardian ad litems, but the one that stuck with me the longest, the guardian ad litem, he never called me. He never came to see my house, but he would go to their house and he would talk to them and he would call them. He'd call me the day before court. And every time I got to court, he was extremely rude to me. And he didn't do anything he was supposed to do. And I just didn't get that. He just didn't have any facts straight. He didn't know anything about me. But Darnell, amazing. He was there, and I was his first case. I think him and his wife did one together, and I was his first solo case. Maddox was, and I was supposed to get a home visit from the guardian ad litem, but I didn't. But I got him from the social workers and from Darnell, and and I love my social workers. I had like a short-term one and a long-term one, and they were both really good. And they would come do home visits and we talk, but it would have to be, what I loved about with Darnell is that he's a volunteer. He's not a government employee. So he got to pick when he wanted to. He had time on his hands and he would come, like you said in the video, once a week. We would go out to dinner with him. We would do things. He would just come and see. On Sundays we would, when my grandparents were alive, we would have everybody come over on Sunday and eat. He came over and saw how the whole family did with him. He took so much time. And whenever I was feeling discouraged, like I said, I just would call. I still call him. In fact, I had to call him the other day. I was like, am I doing the right thing? He's still on my team, which is really awesome. It's been 2 years. He was at our wedding. He just became a really big part of our lives, and speaking for Maddux. And I don't know if you can go to people's weddings when you're an active client, but he wasn't when he came. But he was there, always really encouraging to me. He was one of my biggest cheerleaders. I would just be like, I need to make sure I'm doing the right thing, Darnell. I have to do the right thing. And he would just, and I told her, I said, in his voice and the words he used, and he's just such a calming, happy person that it was always really comforting, and he was there for me. And the real thing that helps in the case is when you go to court and Casa gets to speak. And for any of you volunteers, I just urge you to say what you need to say, because you guys get to say things that social workers can't. You get to speak from the heart a little bit more. And that's really important in the courtroom when you've got facts flying around all over the place. And look at this pattern, yeah, but then we broke patterns and facts and all this stuff. But then you come up there and you're like, hey, I've spent the last 14 months with his whole family, and I'm telling you what I see and what I know he needs. And that has a whole different power in a courtroom that I have never seen. Because when Darnell came to speak, we had been in there about 2 hours, and it was a circus, and it didn't look like anything was going to go good for me until he got up there and he said what he had to say. And he was so emotional. He had tears. If y'all are so emotional and y'all have tears and y'all feel that strong, y'all need to do it, because I think it played a big part with us. So I'm really, really appreciative for the amount of time and consideration, and he took it serious.
Yeah.
Because it's my son's life. It's serious. And if you say that I'm not his mom, it's not he doesn't need to go with me, and you truly think that, then I'm going to respect. I mean, I just want what's best for him. So I need you to want what's best for him, and whatever, you know, I was prepared for the worst, and I mean, this was the best outcome. You know, and Casa did so much for me in that time period.
And you mentioned that you had a really positive relationship with the social worker. What made that relationship positive? Because I could definitely see, and it does happen a lot of times. Sometimes there's an adversarial dynamic almost, you know, the DSS worker is having to hold them accountable and push the parent. And so sometimes there can be hard feelings there. So what made that a positive relationship for you?
Well, the one that I got, because when they tried to come find me to tell me I couldn't go back, I had left, and they couldn't, and I was trying to stay away so that my husband couldn't find me, so nobody could find me. So until they did. So when I finally met her, she wasn't too happy to meet me because she thought I didn't care. But I did care. I mean, I was still in the worst place at that moment. But then she came around, and she was supportive of me. But then the next girl, she, I don't know. I think what it was that I knew that I was wrong. I knew that I needed to change and I needed to do things. And I think that just made it a lot easier for everyone. And the relationships at social services, maybe just because I was just eager. I was like ready to do it. And she was just easy to talk to. She wasn't judgmental. She was, like I said, she went in it the way she needed to, with like a clean slate and supportive and just telling me what I needed to do. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay. And I didn't give her any fight about it. So
yeah. Would you say, Ashby, so it's been my experience watching cases go through the system, and I think this is absolutely true whether we're talking about reunifying with the parents or a child being placed with a relative, for it to be able to be an outcome, there has to be someone in the system that believes in that as a possibility to even put it on the table, because the fact of the matter is that, especially if a child is in foster care, you bring a child out of a situation where you know that there are some major problems, there's dysfunction, there may be even generational patterns of abuse or neglect. You put the child in a foster home, those foster parents are already fabulous parents. They wouldn't be chosen as foster parents if they weren't, you know, great and safe. And the easiest thing in the world would be if we don't try and go full court press for parents or family members, that case is on a slow roll to adoption. That's just the fact of the matter. So there has to be someone in the system that really champions a family member, a parent. And I don't mean, you know, in the face of, you know, if you're not doing the things that you need to. We need to be truth tellers too, but there has to be someone holding on to that hope and believing that it is possible and willing to help support you as well. Would you say that that is true based on what you saw and experienced?
Yes, I do. And I'm sorry, I'm just really blown away by those numbers you gave me earlier. It just makes me so upset that I mean, I don't know, that you need people in there that want, I mean, it's just so important. I mean, you got to have people in these positions that, I mean, I don't know why you'd want to have a job like that if you weren't trying to do something good. Like, I mean, I don't know, not the easiest way. My way definitely wasn't the easiest, but it was the best option for everybody in our family. Even outside of me and Maddox. I mean, everybody. And I felt like I felt like most everybody that I had to, the social services and Darnell, I just really felt that like a lot of people, that's what they wanted to do for me or for Maddox.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I was going to get my stuff together, then they were going to help me get my kid back.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it felt to be the whole time, really. I mean, there were a few times when I'd go to court, or, you know, there was definitely situations. There were definitely times where I was like, oh my gosh, you know, I felt like things were against me. But overall, whether it was for him to not be with me, be with somebody else in the I thought he would be with the family. I never thought he would go to foster care.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really comforting to me, that even if I didn't get him back, that he would be with somebody in our family.
Mm-hmm. And would you say too, you know, a year ago or whenever it was that the video was put together and we shared it on our Facebook page, I remember, and I loved reading through all the comments on that post. It was so clear. You have a village around you. There are people that love and support you. And honestly, that's a really critical element in reunification. Like, I mean, can you imagine if you had gotten Maddox back and were trying to parent, still sort of living in all those broken relationships without the support you have now? How do you think
that would look like? I don't know. Right. I'm just really blessed. I mean, even with because I hadn't fully gotten him back when I went back to school, and I even gained new friendships with people who were encouraging to me. Like, I just had encouragement everywhere I was. I mean, I had teachers, other students, and, you know, I had my family. It would have been really, I don't know, it just, I'm not sure.
Can you talk a little bit too, because it sounds like it was such a 180. How did you transition from that point of those very difficult relationships, some of the most like intimate in your life, like with your mom? How did you transition to the point? Because in the video you talk about what a huge support she is now and even came to be during the case. So how did that happen? And is that something that you would recommend for us as Casa to keep an eye on in the case? Like, if we're going to work towards reunification or the child being placed in the family, that, hey, we might need to get some therapeutic help in there for some of those relationships.
Yeah. I think that, like, once I was in therapy, like we suggested, like talking, me and my mom through the years have done like counseling sessions all the time and everything. We've done a lot of stuff, just like the rehabs and we were in a revolving door. And I think it would be really beneficial if y'all are the reunification, if there are like some trauma or turmoil, to like offer, you know, or tell them they need to do that. And I think it's really beneficial for me. I don't remember if we had one during, I think we did. No, we did. We had a couple actually where we had to go to counseling together. And really what it came down to for me was, because I didn't trust her. I didn't trust she was actually trying to help me.
Mm-hmm.
I thought she wanted to take him and that she didn't want to give him back. I didn't think she wanted me to have him at all ever again. And I just heard, and it was really hard because, you know, in my teenage years, she wasn't, you know, a parent around a lot. So it just really, I didn't like listening to her.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be around her. Sometimes didn't even want her help, but she was at the time the only person really available for work and all the other stuff to take them on and help me. So I had to suck it up. I had to pray a lot. And then court gave her custody, and I'm like, again, it's all out of my hands. And if I'm gonna have to be around this woman, I just had to let my guard down and be less suspicious and a little more trusting. And I just gave it to God, and her intentions were good, and what she said, which was to help me get him back. I didn't believe it at first, and I just made a personal decision to trust her even though I didn't want to. And it's been really good for us.
Good,
It's like
yeah.
what I guess a mother-daughter relationship is supposed to look like. I don't know. It took me about 25 years to get one. So, but I think that's really good. If there is, like, you know, that needs to be done, I think that's a really good step for people that have tough family relationships but might be able to help in a situation like this.
Yeah. And I think that raises such a good point to, you know, reunification or placement with a relative, keeping the child in the family circle. That is such a huge gift to the entire family. Like, if you think about all the people that loved Maddox when this started and all the people that love him now, that is, you know, keeping the child in the family circle versus being adopted out most often by the foster home.
He's got 13 cousins, first cousins that he sees a lot.
Right.
So, you know.
And that's such an important point too, because again, you know, when the child is in foster care, most often the child is only visiting with mom and with dad. Maybe if we're lucky, we might see some grandparents in there too, but that's usually a little more rationed. And, you know, mom and dad can maybe bring family members with them to visit, but the relationships with family members a lot of times are so much more rationed when they're in foster care. But then when they're placed within the circle of family, like at Sunday dinner, you might see 10 relatives that the child might go for a year in foster care never seeing. So that's just so important to think about, because we really don't think about an adoption like maybe we think about maybe the parent experiencing that grief and loss, right? But that would have been grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles that lost Maddox as well. And we really don't have that as part of the adoption conversation. That
and all of them, my grandma, aunts, uncles, cousins, his cousins, they all, I mean, I've got one in each, like 5-mile radius anyway, you know, all the time. I mean, he sees his family all the time. And that is something you know, even me, I don't really think I've thought about when it comes to adoption. Thinking about all those other family members that just love them too, that are missing out.
Right. And I would encourage our Casa volunteers to be thinking about that. While it is becoming more common in this day and age to continue contact with, especially the parents after adoption, if, you know, the parent is safe and the adoptive family feels like they can set some boundaries that will keep everybody safe. Again, a lot of times we lose all those auxiliary family members too. Again, maybe if we're lucky, contact with a grandparent or something might continue, but that's really dependent on the foster family having developed a relationship with those people and knowing them well enough to do that. And again, if we're not even integrating those family members in during the foster care process, how can anybody get a vibe on them or develop a relationship or feel safe with them? So that's just something so important for us to think about.
And that's what I loved with Darnell about the Sunday dinner is that he got to come see him play with all his cousins and aunts and uncles, and to see, you know, this is his life. I mean, this is what, you know, these are the people that, you know, love him, see him all the time.
Right. And kind of on the other side of that, so you've sort of alluded to, so with paternal grandparents, there were some difficulties in the dynamics there as well. You know, perhaps some ways that there had been enabling of past abuse or some concerns. But they loved Maddox. And I think when you and I talked, you said that you make sure that they're a part of his life and you don't, you know, block them out or anything. But that is something to definitely think about in when we're thinking about reunification or placing within the family circle. Like, boundaries are going to be super important, and whoever is the guardian of the child needs to be able to have good judgment and think about how to manage people that may be unsafe at times. So can you talk a little bit about how you've thought about that? What boundaries do you use to keep Maddox or yourself safe and to manage any of those difficult dynamics?
Well, I'm currently going through some stuff right now where I'm having to put boundaries up. Yes, with his grandparents. He loves them so much. We get along fine when my ex isn't involved. We talk and we do, and they visit him. She was a teacher, elementary school teacher for 30 years, so she helps me with homeschooling.
Nice.
Yeah, so we have a really good relationship. But they are enablers, and currently, my ex unexpectedly got released from jail, and they're enabling again. And this is actually why I had to call Darnell the other day, because he's back at their home. And when we last went to court, they said he had to, he had to complete a program and stay clean for 2 years before he even got like a set supervised schedule for him, and left it up to me. Well, I mean, it was really unexpected. I wasn't planning on seeing or hearing from him probably for another year. So it came out of the blue, and he hasn't seen Maddux since it's probably been about 2 years. He has phone calls with him. I don't ever say anything bad about him to him. I let him know he's got 2 dads, and he's just really lucky to be so loved. So my boundaries, they're a little upset because he can't go to their house right now because my ex is there, and they're trying to manipulate me a lot. And it's still, the journey still continues, and I think it will until his whole life, or at least until he's 18 with them. I think I'm going to have a lot of ups and downs, and a lot of readjusting of boundaries. So it's really important that when y'all are looking for who's going to keep the child, that they're able to adjust boundaries as needed. It's been really hard for me to stand up to them. Some of my PTSD comes from them enabling. Just the fact that they know a lot of stuff that went on, and I don't feel like they kept us safe when I felt like they should have tried. But I put it all behind me because he loves them, and the dad wasn't in the picture, but now he is. So we're just kind of feeling it out. They're not super happy with me, but they don't have to be.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm still working with them. They'll FaceTime him and stuff, and they have come over and seen him a couple times. One day she watched him while I went, and I had when I needed to be at Agape, and she came in, did school with him that day. So they're still around, but they're really harassing me currently about, they just want, he's still even on bond. He's probably going back to jail, and they just want Maddox, they just want him to be like his dad full time right now. And he hasn't So it's frustrating, trying to stay calm and collected and keep Maddox in mind and do all of these things and be nice and civil.
Do you feel like you would have had, like at the start of this process, do you feel like you would have had a good understanding on your own of what boundaries to set to be safe and how to balance the, the desire potentially to people please or not have someone mad at you versus the need to keep your child safe? Or is that an area that you developed in your thinking as a result of some of the therapeutic work that you did?
On my own, definitely not. I, with a lot of prayer and a lot of, it's kind of like I have a counsel for how I react on things. I just talk to a lot. I talk to trusted people. I talk to my husband before responding to anything they say out of emotion. I don't want to be emotional. I talk to him, I'll talk to my best friend, I'll talk to my mom, and I'll hear different sides of things. And then I pray about it and I make my decision. And that's how I've lived the last 4 years, and it's working pretty good. I don't ever just say what I'm thinking when it comes to difficult situations or serious stuff with him. I have to talk it over with people.
Yeah. And do you feel like, too, I'm curious to hear your response to this, because sometimes when the child is placed within the family circle, there are members of the family that there still might be risk around. We want the child to have a relationship with that person, but we don't want harm to come to the child. So again, sometimes there have to be boundaries. Sometimes I feel like maybe attorneys want to give the most flexibility possible to the family, so they don't want to put too many of those boundaries in writing. Whereas sometimes as Casa, as the advocate for the child, seeing some of the family dynamics up close, I know what it can look like and feel like if one family member is consistently having to be the bad guy. And sometimes it can really help if the court will put in writing, for example, like you said they did with Maddox's dad, that he needed to get therapy or he needed to complete this and this before having contact, or like even with you at different times in the case that your visits had to be supervised or something like that. Do you think sometimes having that in writing from the court is helpful to back you up so that it's not just like, Ashby's not the one screwing up your life, the court said this?
Yeah, absolutely. I keep everything. I still have everything. And I'm going to keep it. I don't know. Like I said, we go on good terms and bad terms, but they can be challenging. So I just keep everything, just like when he came back and was trying to say he needed to see him and all this stuff. And I was like, well, don't you? I just reminded him of, what was suggested. I think having it in writing is very, very good. Specific in cases, yeah.
Okay.
Because people will find loopholes.
Yes, they will. Yes,
That's what
they
I
will.
feel frequently.
Yes.
So
It's kind of specialize in that. Yes.
Writing for me. So
Good. Okay. Well, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you feel like is really important that you want people to know, or advice, additional advice that you'd want to give? Anything?
I just think this is a really, really important organization, and that we need volunteers, and that these volunteers just don't take it lightly and take it seriously, because it is affecting a lot of lives. You're in deep with these families that you don't know, in these kids' lives, like you have a say in it, and just be really discerning, and you gotta want to help. You just clear-minded and be there, and don't judge too quickly. Don't make decisions too quickly. Do a lot of listening and watching, and
show up in
yes,
person.
show up and be available to that too. Like I said, he would, answer the phone when I call or text me. I mean, he was always, he was just always there for me, and it was really, really important and helpful. And I just hope you guys, I wish you guys good luck, and I just hope we can help some people and these families. It's really important. Not enough people have their back.
Yeah.
Kids. So.
And again, I mean, I think it's worth pointing out too that so many of the parents that come to us have elements of the story that are very similar to yours. Like, so many of our parents do have PTSD, have early trauma, and so many of our parents already have a tape recorder in their head running on loop telling them what a failure they are as a person, as a parent. So even though there absolutely needs to be accountability, we don't want to be adding to the messaging that you suck. We want to be holding on to hope for these parents. And somebody actually asked in the chat box, Darnell, it clearly he helped support you and sort of champion your progress. Were there ever times where he did have to say, girl, we need to tighten it up, or, you're not meeting expectations right now, like, this is what needs to happen if you want to meet your goal of getting Maddox back?
I don't think he ever had to say that to me.
Do you think he would have if the situation?
I think would have, most certainly. I think there where he said something where he thought I might not want to hear it, but I appreciate any feedback. Like, you don't have to co-sign my crap to excuse me.
I feel like that's a good slogan. We're gonna figure out how to get that on a meme. You don't have to co-sign anybody's crap. Yeah.
And I appreciated that. So if he ever had to, and I think I know he knows, he could have. And that's another thing, like we were talking about, but with you guys and the people, his boundaries. I know I said he came to my wedding, he doesn't, but I'm not, like I said, I'll send him pictures and stuff, of him on his birthday or on holidays and stuff, just to let him know that we're all still doing okay. And I think he likes that. But he was very professional. Though he was there for me emotionally and everything, he was still really professional about everything he did. And if he ever needed to yell at me or get on me and tell me I wasn't doing something, I think he 100% would have.
And would you say too that because of the relationship that you guys had, that you probably would have been able to hear him a little bit better than if it came from, say, the GAL, who you really didn't feel like you had a relationship with?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You could just tell from Darnell that he was ready to be there. He was ready to do the work on his side.
Yeah.
And I could tell he was as serious about stuff as I was. So,
do you feel like it would be a good thing for Casa to say, like in the very beginning of the case and however many times is needed throughout, to say explicitly to family or to parents, hey, our goal is to reunify the family if that can be done safely. That's what my role is here.
Yeah, I think so, because I think a lot of people don't see that. I told you there's a couple of moms that are going through what I'm going through now. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Lost what I was saying.
No, I get it. It happens to me too at the worst times.
I don't even remember. I'm sorry.
And I think you mentioned to me, like, those moms that are kind of going through a similar situation, you encourage them, but you also really kind of lay down the line, like, hey, you need to follow through and complete the services. And
yeah. And that's what I was saying. And they don't think they don't, I don't think they really feel like people want them to get their kid back. And I don't know of who is involved with her or anything, but I just know that people, I know a few people that just don't feel like anybody's rooting for them in the system. And I think it would be really good. Encouragement goes a lot further than you think, especially for people who just don't hear it enough.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I've asked a lot of questions, but I did want to make sure, what are people's questions? Barbara asked just now, did you have to pay for the services that you were ordered to complete or any court costs?
I don't think that I did. I think I had to pay for my drug tests at IOP. But I'm not sure if that has to do with like an insurance thing.
Did you have Medicaid at the time?
Do what?
Did you have Medicaid at the time?
I had Medicaid, and I was on my dad's insurance until I was like 27. So I was covered for a lot of things.
And so
that's more of a, like they tell you what to do, but you gotta pay for it if it's required. I don't think the parenting classes I had to pay for. But I don't remember.
I think most of the time the parenting classes are free, and if not, they definitely should be.
Yeah, I think
Medicaid typically will cover like outpatient substance abuse services like IOP or individual counseling.
those aren't free, but I believe it's like insurance based. If you have Medicaid and usually take works for IOP. I mean, it did when I was there, but I don't.
Yeah. And Barbara also asked, how did you come to believe that you are loved?
I think when I was speaking earlier about that moment of being at the Salvation Army, no car, no home, no kid, no family, and I said I felt the freedom, and in that moment I felt the first jolt of love that I needed. I just felt that God was finally saying to me that you're my child and I love you, and this looks really bad, but this is a gift for you.
Oh.
I want you to do what you can with it. And it started there, and I just had this, I don't know, it was like I was so rejuvenated, and that was the first time that I was like, okay, I might be able to do something with this life, and I might be worth it. And even though I looked horrible, I weighed 95 pounds with a bag of clothes or belongings, and then my husband now, he was who I saw a lot, and I saw a lot of most person I saw, because in the beginning, and he just loved on me until I would love myself. He knew I could do all of this. He knew it, and I didn't. And I don't know what he saw in that 95-pound heroin addict girl, but he saw something, and he just supported me and just encouraged me and loved me until one day I decided that he was right. And and then, more people kept coming in and helping me, and then I realized I wasn't so horrible, and it was a process. But between God and my husband, they really helped me see my worth.
And what I hear so strongly from your story, and honestly from other reunification stories that I've heard where the child has reunified with the parents, is the low point is not the final measure, right? We cannot turn our backs on hope, because hope is a seed that we plant. Sometimes it's something that other people have to hold for you and have to keep communicating to you. When you can't feel, see that hope, or what it would look like if hope comes true in 5 years. But also too that, you know, yes, there can be multiple instances of falling down or failing to recover or be the parent you want to be, but that's not the end. That's not the end.
No.
So we can't give up. We can't stop offering the help or the services, because each one makes a difference.
Yeah.
And have to hold on to that hope.
Yes, you definitely do. I mean, I lost hope so many times. I mean, I had multiple suicide attempts in my life, not just when I was younger. I lost hope a lot. And it's just crazy where you find it too, when you've lost it, and where you find it in the most unlikely of places for me. Hope and love. I mean, just that moment, being completely broken and vulnerable, and just, it was just time to stop doing things Ashby's way. I was so tired of doing things that Ashby wanted to do because Ashby was wrong. So, I just threw my hands up and I said, it's time for you to tell me what to do. And I'm just going to say, okay, and we'll see what happens.
What do you think might be the hardest part of having gone through this experience that people might not realize?
I don't know. There's a lot of hard parts. I mean, it was all hard. But it became easier. I mean, the hardest for me, and now here I am again, just rehashing. And those days, I just had to go over with my lawyer, with social services, with everybody. I had to go over all the horrible things that I had done, over and over, and trying to feel good about myself after doing all that over and over again. That was really hard. Just having to admit the crummy, horrible things that you've done over and over. Because I had to feel out of that in the beginning, because there was a lot that I did wrong, a lot. And it was brought up in court at first, and having to go through that was really hard. And giving yourself a break is really hard. Now I'm a completely different person, and I beat myself up a lot when I don't do something I think I should have got done. And I just got to remember that I just wouldn't have done anything before. I mean, sorry.
No.
Yeah.
I've appreciated so much everything that you've had.
When you talk about it still so much years later, your brain just
Yeah. And
but yeah, it's what was really hard, the going over that stuff, and sometimes it's just really hard to have to keep on hearing about all the things you did wrong.
And I think that's
then, of course, being away from him.
Yeah. That we sometimes forget about, like at family partnership meetings, those can be really big team meetings and court hearings, like being surrounded by strangers or people that you know or you feel like are judging you, and having to hear all that, your mistakes rehashed and rehashed. Like, I think that we forget sometimes how much courage it takes just for parents to show up to those type of environments where they feel like they are going to be the underdog and
Yeah.
their mistakes are going to be paraded through.
Yeah. It's not fun, but now I don't have any problems sharing the kind of person that I used to be and what I went through. So, I mean, it was all worth it. And it was all really good for me, as much as him. So
We appreciate you so much. I'll read you some of the positive comments. You should be commended for your resilience through all the adversity that you've experienced. You are a beautiful young woman with an amazing, encouraging story. Before you had no hope, now you can bring hope to everyone in your life. She is so amazing and inspirational. It must have been such a difficult experience, but for her to turn it into something so positive, not many people can do that. I thank you so much for sharing your story. You've really helped me see and understand what you were going through. You're an amazing person, and Maddox is lucky to have you as his mom. Thank you for your vulnerability and willingness to share with us. Your story of hope is such a blessing to hear. May the Lord continue to bless you and Maddox and your entire family. We will remember to really listen and watch, slow to judge, as we care for the foster children in our home. Stories matter. I'm so grateful for your courage. You are amongst friends, no judgment from us. Your story gives us hope because, as Christy said, not very often do we hear or see a story of reunification. From Joseph, thank you so much for sharing, Ashby. God has truly rescued you from what to many appeared to be a hopeless situation. Now you will be a light to many.
yes, thank you. And that's one of the comments, that in me being a statistic or whatever, I know that it can get really discouraging, in these crisis situations, and you might feel like you're around like some really awful people or they're just doing really bad things, but just think none of y'all would recognize me if I showed you who I was 4 years ago. I'm about 50 pounds heavier, and you don't know. Just have hope in people. And not everybody's going to do the right thing, but there are people out there that are willing to do the right thing for their babies.
Well, all right. I hope this was a productive and helpful conversation for everybody listening along. Don't forget, if you want me to send you a certificate by email, make sure you chat your name and email in the chat box. We appreciate everyone being here. And again, I hope that folks will sign up for the training that we have to hear from a relative that got child relatives out of foster care, and then finally for the adoption piece as well. So thank you so much for being here, Ashby. We don't take it lightly, and you've given us so much to think about. Thank you so much.
Thank you, all of you guys, for taking your time and not getting paid to be there for these people. It's really appreciated.
Absolutely. Well, much love to you and Maddox and to your husband, and yeah, we'll hope to bump into you in Walmart or something sometime. out in the world.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.